because I get a lot of messages from women. How do I get my husband to step up? Right. It's a whole subject of conversation. And, it's a very complicated question with no single silver bullet answer. I have some ideas, but I'm curious because it sounds like, you speak from a position of authority to women that I don't know that I could necessarily claim. Like a woman writes to me and says, why won't my husband step up? Well, my expertise is in men. So I'm going to give her, I'm going to take her at face value, right? Which I shouldn't always do, but I do it anyway. Take her at face value and say that, okay, let's just assume that you're telling the truth and he's the only problem. Probably not, but still. How to speak to men to call forth the best in them versus like, I don't know that I could as authoritatively say, well, maybe you need to work on yourself first. That'd be right. But that's why the Renaissance of men and the Renaissance of women exist, because we're tackling two halves of the problem with their own individual expertise from our own experiences. So if you could say some of the answers that you give to some of these women, because that was very powerful for me to hear. It's like part of it is like, you have to work on yourself and don't worry so much about him in some ways.
Yeah. And that's like, people will message me looking for the magic pill.
Right.
They want me to say something that's going to make all the stars align and just click. And I see it all the time, and I recognize it because I used to do that of like, I remember like being in a hard place and I reached out to like the transformed wife and I was like, she's going to have the answer. Before I started my page. But,
she's awesome, by the way.
Yeah. So I recognize that when people are reaching out and they're like, please give me the answer. And something I like to say is like, I just present this universal truth, which is you can't change anybody else.
Yeah.
And that truth can either make you so mad and just frustrate you to no end and put you on this spinning hamster wheel. You can do that with that, or you can work on focusing on yourself. And I think it is a merciful and loving thing to tell people that, because if they're still thinking, I can change my husband, like, they're going to be very, very frustrated. And I see this, and I've wanted to articulate this in a post of like, when you come across marriage advice that is, in order to work, it requires that you change your husband or change his behavior, run from it. Mm-hmm. Because it's not offering you anything sustainable, and it's not offering you something that is, it's just going to drive you deeper and deeper into frustration. So that's the first thing, is like, just asking them, like, I mean, just showing them, can you change anyone else? Like, can you change another person? Can you change your boss? Why do you think you can change your husband? Now, show them that, and then show them the beautiful thing, which is as it says in 1 Peter 3, your pure and respectful conduct may win your husband without a word. And so, and that's what it says in 1 Peter 3, is like, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives. Right? Mm. And I'm like, this is the key right here in this text. You can't, if your husband's being disobedient to the word, or maybe he's just not being the husband you want him to be. Okay. We don't, maybe he's just down and out.
Well, how could he possibly be? How could a man ever possibly be 100% of what a woman wants? Like, that's just
exactly right. Yeah. And yeah. So, I bring them to that verse, and because a lot of times, speaking from experience, if I want to change something about my husband, I try to talk his ear off into changing, which is silly, right?
That's not going to work.
And so it's so interesting to me that Peter literally says they may be won without a word. It's like, you don't need your many words, and you don't need your convincing arguments, and you don't need your I'm smarter than you and you should listen to me spiels. Like,
wow. Not going to work. You wouldn't want it to either.
And like, I have noticed when I get into that place where I'm like trying to verbally assert why he should change or whatever, like, I'm becoming just an unpleasant, aggressive person to be around. It's just like, it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
So, And so showing them that they may be one without a word by their pure and respectful conduct. So start there. Like, then try that out for a while, then come back and truly, if by your conduct you are being respectful and loving and kind and just living in harmony, like seeking to live in peace with your husband as far as it depends on you, then come back to me. Because, and this is the other thing too, is like, so many women will reach out wanting the magic pill. And I'm like, do you have a local church? And like, are you involved in these conversations don't happen in a vacuum. And so people will reach out and I'm like, sounds like neither you or your husband have any sort of community or accountability. Like, that's your first problem. And so I can give you some verses that apply, but the problem is greater than he won't help you with, etc. Like, whatever. So yeah, I think there is also room for, looking at it case by case, because sometimes someone will come to me and they're like, I'm just tired. Like, I do the dishes every night. And it's like, well, find a way to be joyful doing the dishes. Like, it's really okay.
Based.
That's different than, someone coming to me and going, my husband has this alcohol addiction. And that's where I'm going to go,
right.
Are you involved in a local church? Like, do you have accountability? Are there people like, because I'm on the other side of the world behind a screen.
Yeah.
I can't do anything for you here. So anyway, case by case basis, and really, really pointing out that behavior thing, because, and the way that you can make it make sense to women is to just say, let's say that, like, maybe they have an angry husband, and let's say all of a sudden he stopped speaking in this harsh, aggressive, angry way and became very tender and loving. Would that change you? Well, of course it would. Like, maybe.
Oh yeah,
I
see.
You see what I'm saying? Of like, if you, yes, sometimes women are so embittered that their husband, and I'm not talking about the husband being the nice guy all of a sudden. That's not what I'm referring to.
Right, yeah. A decent guy.
Yeah. If there's a serious anger problem or whatever, and, this man repents of it and he starts treating his wife in this loving, still firm, but loving and tender way, that is going to impact her. And so why don't we think the same will happen? Like, no, we don't change people, but we do respond to stimuli, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so, because of course your husband's going to react differently if you treat him with a loving, speak to him lovingly and respectfully, and you actually smile at him and you're actually interested in hearing what he has to say. Of course that's going to make a difference versus ignoring him, quick, snarky responses, trying to assert yourself, blah, blah, blah. So that's my point, is like, just think about every other normal human interaction in your life. There's this, you sense how someone is treating you and you change your response and reaction to that. So why not in your marriage? Like, yeah, I hope that made sense.
It does. That's a great answer. I was, this conversation comes up in various forms at least once a week. And I was out, getting coffee with a friend of mine from church named Amber, shout out Amber. And we were having this very conversation about like, how do we quote unquote, trying to get men to change, and like just trying to unpack it. Cause I don't remember how it came up, but it was very much related because I'm having the conversation in other ways as well with guys during the week and stuff like that. And I think we had come to a similar conclusion that rather than stepping into the space and saying to your husband, you have to be like this and this and this, and lecturing and laying a, like an accountability plan and all that, like, that's just not going to work. That's not going to land for most men. And you wouldn't want to be with a man that it did land for, right?
Right.
You wouldn't respect him anyway. Oh, that sounds like a great plan, honey. I think I'll do that. It's like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to say yes to that, right?
Right.
But if you step out of the space and you create an environment that welcomes him to step into it, and as a woman you're receptive, that calls forth the best in him that he may not necessarily have ever experienced before.
Yeah.
Right? rather than coming in from over the top, where you're just like, you're kind of, it's not even like a top down, bottom up kind of approach. It's like, I'm going to create the opportunity for you to step up and be the hero and to experience that part of yourself that maybe you haven't had the chance to experience perhaps ever, but not for a while at least.
Yeah. And that's a great point, because I'll sometimes get messages from women saying, I know I'm supposed to submit, but like my husband isn't giving me anything to submit to. And I mean, I think there's also like personalities that are involved in this. Like, and so I try to look at things from a case by case basis or whatever, but I sometimes just wonder, like, does he feel able to express those things to you that he actually wants? Or like, have you created an environment where he feels like it's okay to state those things without getting some ridiculous reaction? Or, it's like, and I think in some cases, yes, like I've met people in my real life where the dynamic of the couple is just so different than what I'm familiar with. And I'm like, I don't understand this. But as a general rule, to go back to what you were saying, like there is a way to try to get what you want, but to shut down the possibility for what you actually want. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
I get it.
Women are trying to they're trying to bring these things out of their men. But the way that they're going about it is the very thing that's shutting it down. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so, yeah, how are you? And I always bring it back to 1 Peter 3, your conduct. That is such an interesting word, because conduct isn't just behavior. It's not just speech. It's speech. It's behavior. It's how you dress. It's how you smile. It's how you interact in the world. Conduct is a very holistic word. And so is your conduct bringing that out of your husband? Because I have fallen in the trap so many times wanting to bring something out of my husband, and I immediately go to talking, but my conduct isn't living up to it. Right. So
I think I could also speak for at least some men in seeing that, conduct is also your thoughts. Like I think men are hyper visual, and we take in just an incredible amount of information with our eyes. And it's almost like in watching women, we can't read their mind, but we can read their mind through the changes in their face and their posture based on what they're thinking. Right. And it's like, you may not say anything, you may not do anything, but a man's like, what's wrong? Right. So
yeah. And yeah, my husband does this to me all the time of like, I'll like cock my head differently, and it's like, what's going on? Like,
yes.
So, no, and to go back to thoughts too, I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
This is the other thing that I tell women is, how are you thinking about your husband?
Yeah.
Because you've just told me all these things he's doing wrong. Yeah. If you're dwelling on that all day, that is a recipe for only seeing the bad things. And so like, I remember when my husband and I were going through a hard time, he would drop me off at work, or I would take the car, whatever, how it worked out. And I would be stocking shelves in the morning, and it was like my morning bitterness rehashing stocking shelves time.
Oh, wow.
Like time to put candy on the shelf and think about how angry I am.
One bag, that bastard.
It's like, and it's like, I remember I had this clicking moment where I was like, you know what? I bet if I replaced these thoughts with scripture that I've memorized, my life would change. I don't know for sure, but I think maybe my life would change. And so there would be times I'd be stocking shelves, and I would either start getting those adulterous thoughts or those bitter thoughts, and I would just be rehashing it in my mind. And then I would go, let's just go through 1 Peter. Let's just go through this. And I would actively replace that thought. And you can't be thinking about adultery while you're, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who's blessed us with every, it's like,
I'm not going to work so well. Someone's going to win. That one of those thoughts is going to win.
One of those thoughts is going to win. And I mean, the hard part for women though, is getting to them. It's like, I can tell you, you need to replace those thoughts with scripture. You need to replace those thoughts with thinking loving thoughts about your husband. I can say that all day. But the hard part for women is really getting to the point where they actually want to get out of the bitter thoughts. Because the bitter place is a comfortable stewing sort of place to be. And I realized that I was in that place for so long. I was addicted to that feeling of being angry, getting in my car after work, listening to moody music that was feeding that. I was just addicted to that experience. And so for me, it was like I had all the scripture memorized. The discipline was to go from, in spite of how I feel, I'm going to actively replace that thought. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would also tell women is, how are you thinking about your husband while he's at work? And are you like rage cleaning the house of like, he doesn't help out around the house at all. And I'm just so angry. And yeah, that's your conduct. And when he comes home, he's going to see a rage cleaned house and a rage cleaning wife. Versus, are you like praying for him and thinking loving thoughts about him and speaking to your children in a positive way about their father? And so when he comes home, that's what, you have children who love him and a wife who loves him. And that all goes back to your thoughts.
So I want to talk about this bitterness state of mind, because this is something that I've identified. Yeah, no, it's really important because I think of things, the states of mind that are opposed to Christ and the gospel as power, right? Everything is conceived in terms of power, right? So men who reject the gospel are men who reject submission to Christ because they want to be their own little gods. God is dead. So I'm going to be my own little God because I can be powerful. Now, women don't have the ability to be physically powerful in the same way that men do. But I think of women can become their own little gods, maybe because of that feeling of bitterness, because it gives them power over their environment. Does that map?
You went blank for a second.
Oh, sorry.
You said women don't have the ability to be physically powerful as men do, I lost you.
But, okay, so women don't have the ability to be physically powerful like men do, but women can step into that space of bitterness because it gives them power over their environment.
Yeah.
Do those two map together?
Right. Yeah. Well, and you can do things that you think are having power over your husband. So withholding sex, withholding affection, the silent treatment, this kind of stuff is like the woman's version of trying to have power and over her husband. And that all stems from the root of bitterness. Like Hebrews talks about bitterness as a root. The root of bitterness. See to it that no root of bitterness springs up among you, and by it many become defiled. So, and then it says also in 1 Peter 3, let all bitterness and hypocrisy and malice and envy and slander be put away from you. And to go back to the idea of bitterness being a root, it's a root because all these branches and leaves and things stem out of it. A bad fruit. It bears horrible fruit. But the root is that seething, bitter heart. And it can be, and a lot of the other words we use for that, unforgiveness is one of them. Mm-hmm. I'm harboring unforgiveness for something that your husband said. Or harboring bitterness towards your husband because you resent that he has a different role than you, that he is different, that God made him different, and you resent that, right? And for me, it was bitterness of resenting things that I perceive to be like, oh, I'd want you to do this differently or whatever, but resenting that like one fleshness that means that you do not have that bodily autonomy that is so valued in our culture. Right. So like, and that's, I mean, it's a hard thing to come to grips with when you're 20 and newly married and
yeah. Yeah. You got the full dose, right? Like
I did.
Yeah. That's go ahead.
Well, and I always believed in Christian gender roles. I always believed in, I'm going to get married. I'm going to submit to my husband. Like, of course I'm going to submit to my husband. And that wasn't like something I had to like learn to believe. I always believed that. But it's amazing how the justifications, when you're in that place of bitterness, how the justifications for submission will start, you'll start making excuses. And you basically take the word submission and you whittle it down to this meaningless nothing word. And I see that all the time is, yes, I believe in submission, except in but. And I'm like, so you don't believe in submission. Mm-hmm. You've taken the word and you've completely destroyed it of what makes it submission. It's basically when I agree. Like, mm-hmm. And so, but I noticed that tendency in myself of, where does it talk about people accumulating counselors for themselves for their itching ears?
I don't know.
I think it's in one of the epistles, but it talks about like in the latter days, or they'll accumulate teachers for themselves. And I noticed that with myself, is that I was accumulating people that would tell me what I wanted to hear, mm-hmm. and would tell me, would justify my bitterness and say, yeah, it kind of makes sense that you're feeling that way. You know, I would feel that way too, and blah, 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 blah. And it wasn't until I talked to this one person, and they just said, submit to your husband. And I was like, and they didn't define submission for me. They knew that I knew what submission was. I didn't need someone to define it. And they just said, submit to your husband. It's like, oh, that's all you're going to tell me? So yeah, no, bitterness is, it is the spawn of many evil things. Mm-hmm. It's a poison is the best word to describe it.